Hey guys, my name is Tim. I'm the master mechanic at Etan BMW Mobile Services, and in this video today I'm going to show you how to replace the valve cover gasket on 2009 BMW 328i. This procedure also applies to 2007 till 2013, early 2013 E90, 91, and 92, 93 BMWs with the naturally aspirated 6-cylinder engine. So it's a 328 model. It's also the same procedure on 128 or any other BMW that has the same N51 or N52 engine. It's a little bit different on the X5, let's say, but the X3, the X5 with the 3.0 liter engine, years of 2006 and up, X5 would be 2007 and up. Exactly the same procedure. So I'll show you where it leaks, what happens where it leaks, and how exactly to replace it. Let's get to it. First of all, we're gonna take all the plastic apart. Here's the cabin filter, and this is the engine cover. In order to do that, we'll take this piece out with a screwdriver. Then we'll take those guys out to free the wire, so let it hang. After that, what we're gonna do is take this piece out. You see there is a plastic connector, I would say, like one side, and on the other side is exactly the same one. Also, there is a rubber piece holding it right there, so they slide it out, and there you go. That's that will reveal us one of the main bolts for this whole thing. It's right here, 8mm, and this bolt will be different from the other ones. If you check the thread, and I'll just take you the other one so you don't mix them. So this is the one that holding the cabin filter. So if you compare those two bolts, you can see they're clearly different, absolutely different. So this one goes in here, and you will have the same one on the other side. And now we're gonna take other bolts. It's well, technically I would say 4 bolts on each side, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and the same on the other side. Also disconnect this connector right here. Take those guys out, and there you go, slide it aside. Also, there is one more rubber piece that holding this thing together. Just slide it out, and this wire as well. It's not the wire, it's for the washer fluid. And then we're moving to the other side, same as over there. Just pop it off, rubber off, put it right there. Same 8mm, and another 3 bolts. And then you can move the cabin filter out of the way. Here's the cabin filter. If you need to replace that, those are tabs. Just take them off, and that's pretty much it. Now here's another rubber piece that holding this whole thing in place. So you just slide it out and put it down. And now we're ready to remove this whole thing. So what we're gonna do is lift it a little bit up, take the wire out, and there you go. The next thing would be the engine cover. That what makes engine bay looks pretty. We have 4 bolts in here. Those are 5mm Allen. You can use Torx 30. That's what I usually use. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Usually missing. That's the way it is. That's the way it always happens. now we can just lift it up and slide it out. After all the plastic removed, now we're exposed to all of the ignition coils, and we have to remove all of them. So the way to do it is you can start by lifting it with the fingers if it works. If it doesn't work, like because sometimes they get stuck, so you can put your screwdriver right here in this gap and just twist it a little bit. So that will give you the opportunity to lift this, and then when you push it more, it releases the connector, just like that. But in some cases it doesn't, it slides over it, so you can put, I'll show you right here, come over here. So let's say this has failed and nothing works. There is this a little gap between the ignition coil and the electrical connector, so you can put your screwdriver right here and twist it again a little bit, so, and that will allow you to take the connector out safely. Then to remove the ignition coil, we'll have to pull it straight up, I mean considerably, and that's how it's done. Do it with one by one, same process. Every ignition coil is interchangeable on every cylinder, so don't worry to mix them up. You don't have to number them or do anything of nonsense like that. So after all the plastic is taken apart, we also took off all the ignition coils, and right now I just want to show you where it actually leaks. First of all, it's a good point for if you're buying this car and you're inspecting it, just to point out to the owner where it leaks so you can drop the price, or if you want to find out for yourself if your car is leaking. So here it is, just look right there. You see all this buildup of dirt and oil. You see how clear it is? This is oil, and it's not leaking much right now. Like, this is the valve cover gasket that it's in pretty good shape, I would say, but if all of this is dirty, this is where the valve cover gasket leak. Also right there in the back, if it's all oily in there, the same area, like, it's always gonna be there. So this is the first spot where the valve cover gasket is leaking. Other thing, the symptom, just because of the position of the head, it's angled a little bit downward, so when the valve cover gasket is leaking, it's always leaking directly to the exhaust manifold, and when the exhaust manifold gets hot, it gets up to 800 degrees Celsius as far as I remember. It burns this oil right away, and you can have a lot of smoke coming from this area, and that is the clear sign of the valve cover gasket leak. Then after the oil burns on the exhaust manifold, it gets sucked into the cabin through here, and you can smell this oil burning smell inside the car, and you're wondering like what it is. It is the valve cover gasket leak. The other spot, if you do the job, the valve cover gasket replacement, you definitely want to replace eccentric shaft seal. This is the seal right there. Like, this is a little round seal with this is the connector for the sensor. So take it off. You see it's starting to get oil in there, and it's really not good because this sensor is approximately $300 to $100, and in order to replace that, you need to take the valve cover off and replace that. And if you just did the job, you don't want to do it again, trust me. So replace this seal right there. And the other most common leak, that would be the Valvetronic motor seal, this one right here. You can replace that as well, and it's just 2 Torx 40 bolts. When you take the valve cover out, you can do that. So this is the 3 seals that have to be changed on the valve cover job, valve cover gasket replacement job. First thing we're gonna do is remove this bar right here. This is the 11mm socket, will fit just perfect right here, and 14mm socket will fit perfectly right here. Or you can use E sockets. I think this one E14 or E16, and this one probably E14. So we'll take this out. We'll loosen this one. We don't take it out. It's not really necessary. And then you slide it out. There you go. Put it aside. After that, we already disconnected this. Then we disconnect the Valvetronic motor by pushing those tabs right here, sliding it out. Then we have two 8mm nuts, one right here and the other one is right there. So just take those nuts off and remove this whole wiring. I'll show you how in a second. In order to remove this whole harness, you can see there's little tabs right here. So you push it and you lift it, and then right here as well. So it's one side, and then on the bottom, just one. And from here on, you can just straight lift it, but there is one little pin right there, and on the other side. That's it. There you go. The next thing we're gonna do is free the harness and remove this plastic cover. So what you're gonna do is there's tabs right here on the other side as well, and a little bit hard to reach, but right here a small ones, exactly the same system, one side and the other. Then we move those guys to the open position, and in order to do that, and some of them you can just slide them. Right here we need to lift this little pin just a bit and slide it off. Right here, just slide it off. And then we can move this whole plastic thing off. This allows us to free all the wires from its spots right here. But in order to completely free them, the next thing we gotta do is to disconnect those positive ones. And we have here 10mm nut and 13mm nut right here. If you haven't disconnected the battery, I recommend you to do so, but if you didn't, just don't touch anything metal when you're taking those 10mm and 13mm nuts. Otherwise it's gonna be short. Most likely nothing is gonna happen. You're not gonna fry your computer. You're not gonna do this or that like it's all non-existent nonsense. Happened to me. Nothing happens. Just move on. It's just sparks. That's pretty much it. But be careful. Better disconnect the battery and move on. Out. So those bolts, nuts are out, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna remove the wires from the terminals, and I'll put this cap back on so we don't accidentally touch it if the battery is connected still. And now we can clearly remove this whole thing out. In order to completely free this wiring so it's out of the way when we remove the valve cover, we will have to disconnect the harness from fuel injectors. And there is a cheating way to do it using the long screwdriver. What you can do is one by one you just press it right there and it pops off. But there is a chance you can break the connector even though it will not affect the future use. if this happens, you can take those little brackets one by one, just pushing them to the side and to the other side. But what we're gonna do here is just using this popping method. Just be very careful and very gentle with it. If you break it, don't blame me after that. And the last one. There it is. And now just disconnect those two. And now we can finally take it out of the way. You see? Everything's safe and sound. None of the connectors are broken, but be very careful and gentle with those guys right here. So now we can move this harness into this position, kind of lock it right here, and it's completely out of the way of the valve cover, so nothing is there. Next thing we're gonna do is disconnect this crankcase ventilation valve hose, and the way to do it, it's like you see, this is the one tab right here, so this tab right here, the other side is 180 degrees. What I'm gonna use is this tool, so I'm just gonna put it right there, push it, hold it, and then push this one a little bit like that. And there you go, nice and simple. That's the easiest way to do it. After that, free some wires here, oxygen sensor wiring. We don't need to remove that, we just need to free them. And after that we have 3 bolts for Valvetronic motor. Those are E8 sockets, and one right here, one on the other side, and the bottom one is right there. That's the third one. We'll start with this one and then remove those two, and I'll show you in a bit. One out. Then I'll take off this one. And the last one would be this bolt. Just be careful with it, because when you remove it, it's gonna jump the Valvetronic motor. See, it's already under tension. What I would usually do, I'm not gonna use the drill. Just hold it in one place, because when it jumps and you're not expecting it, and you can lose the bolt, that's very easy to happen, and then you just release it. There you go. After that, we're gonna remove all of the bolts right there around the valve cover, and there is 3 bolts in the middle. For those middle ones, you definitely will need a deep socket like that, 10 millimeter socket. It's nice. It's 1, 2, and 3 right there, so those are 3 in the middle, and the rest is very simple right there. I'll just show you how to remove the ones in the back, what to use. There's 3 bolts. The hardest one is the furthest downward, the one right there, and then the middle, and then top. And let's start with those. Those are E10 sockets. So we're gonna get the E10 socket right now. I would start with this extension, and then put it on this extension, and you see though those are a little bit moving ones. Then take those wires out as well, just out of the way, so it can give you a clear view, kinda. That's the way to do it. You just follow the extension, feel the bolts, so it's on, and that's it. So that's the hardest one. It was kind of loose, I'll tell that. When it's completely off, using the same extension, we go in the middle. It's right there, like right here in the middle. So we're just gonna follow it again with the hand. You feel the bolt, put the extension on, it's loose. Now you can just use your hands. This one out, and the third one exactly the same. Put it on the bolt, exactly the same extensions. Completely off. You don't need to take the bolts off, they are kind of in the valve cover, so you don't need to remove them completely. Just make sure they're all the way up and they loose. Next thing we're gonna do, as long as we're here, we're gonna remove this weather strip. You can do it halfway, no need to remove it completely. That will allow us to lift the valve cover off. And the next thing is, what I'm gonna do is remove this 10mm bolt, this 10mm bolt, and I think it's gonna be enough, but if it's not for you, remove the third 10mm bolt. And in order to do that, you'll need to remove this bar. It's the same 11mm, and this bolt in the middle is already loose. What it gives us, it kind of gives us this flexibility of this part. So when we move the valve cover, this piece is definitely going to be on the way, but because we remove those bolts, it gives us more flexibility. The only three bolts you need to remove from the valve cover would be this 10mm in the middle. Oh, can't reach it with the magnet. So this is the first one right there. Then there's two E10 bolts on this plate. So one right here and the other one is right here. This one. You want to remove them because when you start to removing the valve cover, you can forget about them, flip it, lose it, don't do it. Put them aside. Next thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna remove those 10mm bolts from the expansion tank, coolant expansion tank, just to get it free. This will allow us once again to lift the expansion tank out of the way and bend it a little bit so this hose is not on the way. It's easy to break it. I better keep it out of harm's way. And that's all. Right now we are basically ready to lift the valve cover, but one more thing. What I would like to do is take this AC line and just move it out of its place, just bottom to the bottom a little bit. Once again, it was right here. I'll just move it right over there. No other things has to be done. Let's just look at the valve cover. Oh, this one goes up really easy. The back. Now we wetted this AC line, which is good. If you can take the spark plug tubes, those ones, from up top, that's perfect. If you can't, you'll have to remove them because this is the most important thing to do. They will be on the way. Those are the simple, and you never think about it, but those guys right there are gonna be the reason why it's gonna be hard for you to get the valve cover out. So if you can't remove it like this from up top, just what you gotta do is move the valve cover just like that, and then lock it in some position, I would say with the front axis, and then reach your hand in there and just take him from the bottom. You can drop it to the engine, to the head, but just take him off. And now we are almost ready to take this valve cover off. There you go. So the valve cover is out. Now we need to remove the old gasket. In some cases it's very brittle. In our case it's pretty fine, but the leak wasn't big. It's just time to replace that, and the previous owner didn't know if it needed to be done or not, but it was leaking just a little bit, just the starting. If it is too brittle, you just want to take it as much as possible in one piece. That's the main thing. Otherwise you'll have to chase those little things in there and clean it all out, because the new gasket will just not fit in properly. When you remove the gasket, well, the best thing to do is definitely use the carburetor cleaner and just go all in the grooves, and then go with the screwdriver and shop towels to just dry it all out. That's what we're going to do right now. Next thing we're gonna do is apply some silicone on important corners. So that's how much you need it exactly. So I'll put it right here on the bottom one, the middle, top, and then a little bit on those gaps on the bottom and top. You don't need much silicone, so just a little bit, just to keep the gasket in place. That's the main rule. It's not to seal anything or anything like that. It's just to keep the gasket in place when you reinstall the valve cover back to the car. Just a little bit will be enough. The top, I would say, needs less silicone because it's easy to see, and if the gasket goes out of place you can easily correct it. The gasket I'm gonna use is L-ring, and there is a reason for that, because I personally had a lot of I used to use a lot Victor Ryan's gaskets, but it's been a bunch of cars when I bought the Victor Ryan's gasket and they just twisted. They don't sit well. You install them, they start leaking right away. I just stay away from them. I know it's most likely has been some factory defect, but It happened to other people as well. It's still happening to some people when they buy Victor Rein's gasket. So I switched to L-Ring, and it's not sponsored by L-Ring. That's just what I use. I just recommend you to stay away from the Victor Rein's. And also one important thing, this is just for this gasket on N51 and N52 engine. I never had a problem with the N54 or N55, but I still use L-Ring over there as well. But the previous generation engines with the thicker gasket or N62 engine, the V8, there is no problem with Victor Rein's. Here's the spots where I put the silicone, and if you can see, it's just a little drops right here on the corners, right there, and just every way along the way. And this is how much you need. You can't do less, you can't do more, I would say. It's I think this is the best way to do it. I might be wrong, but it always works for me. After you install the gasket, just make sure go all the way along the perimeter and make sure it's sitting properly. And after that, after everything is installed and the silicone is in place and the gaskets are in place, just let it sit for 30 minutes, and only after that install the valve cover back to the car. In order to remove this eccentric shaft sensor seal, we'll need a regular screwdriver, and you just need to drive it underneath and pry it against the cover. Slowly, carefully, this is how you do it, little by little, removing this seal. You can also try to push it from the back, but not really recommend that. At a certain point, you're gonna bend this metal part of the seal, and this will give you leverage to take the whole thing out. Just don't overdo it, and it's out. And you're only going to install this seal when the valve cover is right in place and it's already bolted on. Meanwhile, you can clean this part, the valve cover itself, if you want to. But you definitely want to clean part where the seal goes, right here. The rest is just cosmetics. Okay, now we're ready to install the valve cover back. The way I'm gonna hold it is on cylinder 4 and 3, just like that. You can check if the gasket seats properly. Nothing falls out, so that's good. And this is how we're gonna move it. Move it back in. All along the wires. Hold it. Be very careful and always touch the gasket just to make sure it stays in place. This is the hardest part right there in the back. There's also a little obstacle right here. Just remember to always make sure the gasket is still there. It's completely flat. And we're almost there. This is good. tidy this up. Suspension tank is a little bit on the way. Now it's out. One final touch. Gasket is all good. Top to bottom. And there we go. It's hard to explain how to do it, but you just need to do it slow and steady and remove any obstacle that's on the way of the valve cover, like the expansion tank. And there are some components right here, like when you are putting the valve cover back on, this piece will be on the way, but as you can see, it moves pretty good, so it's enough spot. Then this little piece, this is metal, so you'll need to move the valve cover to go around it, and that's pretty much it. When the valve cover gasket is on, when the valve cover is back in place, it sits firmly. Like when you move it, you feel that the gasket is right in place and everything is correct. But if you're not sure, you can lift just one corner and just feel the gasket with your hand. That's the best thing to do if you're not sure if the gasket is still there, because that's the most common mistake. When people replace the valve cover gasket, the gasket slides off or just bends or whatever happens, and they bolt it on and it starts leaking like crazy. So make sure the gasket is where it's supposed to be. Just lift every corner, feel it with your hand, make sure it's all flat and good, and just put it back on. That's all you need to do. And then, yep. And the reason why we don't install the eccentric shaft sensor seal first is just because it's way easier to not break the gasket when it's off, and then we're gonna put the seal on top of it, and that's all. The first bolts I'm gonna, first of all, definitely hand tight the middle bolts, 10 millimeters, all of them. And then you can hand tight all of them and just torque it back to spec with no technically specific order. But if you cross torque it, like bottom one, the top one, middle ones, and then the other ones, and then you just go back and forth top to bottom, but start with the middle, and that's pretty much it. So here's the eccentric shaft sensor seal, and to install it, you just push it over the sensor, and you can use I think it's 30 millimeter socket, the big one, so it goes right over it, and you push it on all the sides, or you just do it like that. And either use your hands, but I usually use this extension a little bit and just push it all the way. All good. And now all the bolts are tight. Everything's good. All the surfaces are clean, and it's time to put it all back together. I would start first with the wiring of the oxygen sensors. So I'm just gonna put them back into their brackets, route them properly. The bottom one is the hardest, and then they go right here on top, and they go above this piece where the crankcase vent valve hose is going. So this will go right there, and they will be right here. So this part is pretty much over. Next thing, well, basically it's all reverse except for well, it's all reverse. I would start with the Valvetronic motor, put it back in. Definitely don't forget at any moment put those back. Just push them all the way down. And as far as I remember, I don't see anything difficult further in the process, so I would say just reverse your steps. It's all the same procedures as before, and well, I'll show you one thing, how to put the Valvetronic motor back in. And this is important. You don't need to reprogram anything or anything like that, reinitialize the Valvetronic motor, or do anything with it, with the scanner or without the scanner. Nothing has to be done. It's fully mechanical unit, so if you didn't touch it, nothing happened. I'll push it all the way, put one bolt in all the way, just hand tight it, and then the other one, so those two will go first. Then you can make them tight. Don't go crazy about it, like there is no significant amount of force in there. Make those bolts tight and then install the third one right there. Next thing of your choosing would be just doing one of those. You can do the wires, put them back where they belong, back in place, and this one is back in place. Take this cover off. Finally, you can put them back. Just routed the way they were. And snap it back in place. The simple thing with this part right here as well, with the fuel injectors, you just push it, you hear the click, it clips in. That's all you need to do. Connect back everything you disconnected. And route the oxygen sensors just like that. And don't forget to plug in the Valvetronic motor. Put all the nuts back. So as I remember, 10mm right here, and 13mm right here. The bolts are tight, so we install the cover back on. Just snap it in there, and it's time to finally cover the wires. Don't put anything in there that you might need. All good. make sure it sits properly, and then just push those first and then those to the locked position. Then adjust this rubber right here. Yeah, that's the way to go. What else? We have 8mm nuts on those little wires. One here, one there. Don't forget about those. I'll just put them right now. And then the other thing is clean this connector with the carburetor cleaner or just a shop towel, just to make sure it's not covered in oil, it's not covered in dust and dirt and all of that, because once again oil damages those sensors, and you definitely don't want to replace this sensor after you just did the valve covered gasket job. This is the electrical cleaner. And I'll just wipe it off just to make it nice. Not really necessary, but you know. All good. Okay, so reinstalling the coil. It's not hard. Just gonna put it right here. Pull this all the way up. Here's the connector. It goes inside. Then you just push it forward and it closes on its own. So you just need to click it and there you go. Push it all the way down and that's how it's supposed to be. Next thing we're gonna do is install this engine cover. I'll take the bolts off. It's easier this way, and put the cover right there. Make sure the holes are aligned. Right here. Once again, we're missing one bolt, so the bottom corner doesn't have a bolt. But it doesn't really matter anyways. Most of the cars we service, we see they only have these two bolts, so you can just take it off without removing the other part. And the next one would be, this one would be the hardest one to install back. The way you want to do it, you want to keep this open and put your hand in there. And now we're gonna put this at the angle, just like that. Slide it on, like there's a little pieces in there that go under this weather seal. So we put it like that. Then put the wire back in here, lock it, and now individually on every side we can just lift it a little bit and push it forward, and then this rubber piece slides back in. Don't forget about your wires. I'll show you again on the other side. Oh well, actually it's seated on its own properly, but you need to push it a little bit forward and the rubber goes back in place. Now we're installing this whole thing is held by this two 8mm with this thread. Not this one, this. You see the difference, right? So this goes right here And exactly the same bolt goes right there on the other side. 8mm. This bolt right there. After all this in place, we can put this thing back on. There's those little things, and this is where it slides in, so just align them. It should be 3 of them. We have only 2. The other one is broken for some reason, and just push it forward. That's all. Then after that, we have our cabin filter housing and the cabin filter itself. So let's just put it in there. And those are different kind of 8mm. Next thing we'll do, just connect back this wiring, put it back in place, and on this side we can use this cover. First of all, this is the way it goes. You pull the rubber piece out like that, and then you slide it in. Also, there is a spot for this water cable or water hose. And now make sure nothing is on the way. You just push it down and it sits in place. Exactly the same process on the other side. It's just a little bit simpler. There is no water hose in there, so you just slide the rubber piece first, just like that. And there you go. Now install the rest of the 8mm bolts that hold the air cabin filter housing. And you're good to go. The car is reassembled. Okay guys, the valve cover gasket job is complete. Everything is clean, everything is good. Just a little pointers: when you finish the job, start the car and you start seeing this massive amounts of smoke coming out, don't worry, that's completely normal. That happens, the reason why, when you lift the valve cover, a little bit of excessive oil comes out and it goes directly to the exhaust manifold, and when you start the car it will start heating up and burning. So that's all fine. Just little pointers: when you're running the car like 10-15 minutes, the smoke should pretty much go away. I would say in some severe cases, like more or less like it takes an hour or so, but smoke goes away, and you just check the surfaces right there. Everything's clean. You can easily see if there is any more oil coming out of anywhere on the bottom. It's usually on the bottom of the valve cover, so check this out. If not, you're good to go. The valve cover gasket usually lasts between, well, I would say factory ones 80 to 100,000 miles. The replacement ones 60 to 80,000 miles. So you're good for a pretty solid period of time, and I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, please ask, and don't hesitate to ask. I'll explain everything to best of my ability, and thank you guys for watching. See you next time.